Hi, my name is Sue Schultz, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar titled, I Want to Become a Bike Fitter. So what do I have to do that? We have two brilliant bike fitters who have joined me today. I will be moderating the discussion, and we will be going through some of the key aspects of steps you might want to consider if you really want to take a look at bike fitting as a possible career or perhaps a side job, but I think it needs to be a career. So the first person we're going to have introduce themselves is Lee Prescott. He's from Warwick in the UK and very experienced bike fitter and is the director and owner, perhaps, of the International Bike Fitting Institute. That's an umbrella organization with a big job. So let's have him introduce himself.
Yeah, hi Sue. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I'm Lee Prescott. I'm based in Warwickshire, which is right in the centre of England, and I currently run our own independent bike fitting studio, Velo Atelier, where we have clinical bike fitting. We do custom bicycle builds from various manufacturers, including our own brand. We have a service center as well, which works with lots of different brands, and we do warranty work for many of the big brands in Europe. I started in this whole crazy industry in around 1985 when I first started playing around with building steel bike frames. My father is a motorbike designer. So kind of, my school holidays were sitting in a corner of a workshop being told to amuse myself with bits of steel and a welding torch. So that's kind of where I started. And as I kind of went through education and ended up doing a degree in industrial design and ergonomics, I then in kind of really just moved straight into the bicycle industry as a bicycle designer. So I come to bike fitting from a slightly different route, I would guess, than most who come. Lots of good bike fitters come through kind of physiotherapy or bike stores, whereas I kind of come from bicycle design for bigger manufacturers. And what originally got me into getting closer to each individual subject on the bike fitting side was, when you design bikes for industry, you're basically just looking at anthropomorphic data, averaging things out and trying to make the best of it. And that's if you're doing a good job. Um, and what I wanted to do is get out of that ivory tower and actually start to deal with individuals. And, custom bikes is what interested me much more in the kind of late 90s, which is when we started offering custom bikes. And that is essentially how I got into bike fitting, was designing bikes for individuals. Um, and then it wasn't too long before the what used to be the bit you'd do so you could design the geometry became a standalone service for people that already had bikes. And our bike fitting was kind of born out of that. Um, and then, as you mentioned, and I'm sorry to kind of ramble on, as you mentioned, a few years ago, Andy Brook, who started the IBFI, approached me and asked if I'd be interested in helping him out with that. And it's an industry I care passionately about. So I was only too happy to volunteer my time to help him out. And then last year he decided that 10 years of running the institute was enough, and he wanted to step down. And did I want to step up, which I was happy to do. I think Andy did a great job, but I had lots of ideas of my own that I really wanted to try and use to influence the industry and press things forwards. And that's really what I've been doing over the last year is hopefully making this institute, which is for all of us as fitters, better and give better value and actually progress the industry, which I think it needs to do.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, and I'm looking forward to hearing your opinions on some of the issues we're going to discuss. All right, Rick?
Yeah, this is Rick Schultz. Sue and I own Bike Fitness Coaching. Started in Southern California. We're now in Bend, Oregon. Southern California, I was lucky enough to be a tester for Shimano as well as Cervelo. And I was always taking parts on and off the bike to test this, to do that with Shimano. And I noticed a couple things. So once you put things, once you reinstall something like their Pro line, you put seat posts on or handlebars, stems, the bike handled it a little differently, and you were either more comfortable or not as comfortable. And it was very eye-opening to get things to start figuring out why I was less comfortable on certain equipment. And it wasn't the equipment, it was the fitting of the equipment. Started getting went on a lot of group rides, a lot of races, and people started talking. I heard people talking about knee pain. So I got into bike fitting as kind of something to do after I retired, and went to a couple classes and started talking to some physical therapists, some orthopedic surgeons, and got a little bit more into it. I went back and took some extracurricular classes like some kinesiology, exercise science. I took some biomechanics courses and started understanding how and why the body moves on a bicycle, how it's comfortable, why it's not, and started putting my own theories and my own way of doing bike fitting into the bike fitting that we do. And I was lucky enough there was several bike shops down in the Southern California area. As some of the main companies got out of fitting, and especially before or during the COVID era, they would send me this was specialized in one of the Trek stores. I would be getting all their fitting customers. They were specializing in selling bikes and doing maintenance on the bikes. From there, it kind of grew from that point. And that's basically just a quick nutshell of where we are and where we come from.
Okay. And as we go on, we can sort of elaborate a bit on some of those things. So we're not going to go into great detail about everything. However, there are about 6 different subtopics that we're going to discuss. And before we get into some of this, I want each of you to, in 1 or 2 sentences, define what a bike fitter does. So I'm going to let Lee go because he's our guest today. So in 1 or 2 sentences, Lee, I want you to tell me what a bike fitter is.
Well, there's no small challenge. I mean, I think ultimately bike fitters are kind of the real, jack of all trades, master of none, or maybe I should say, jack of all trades, master of all. I would say if I was going to try and really slim it down, essentially what a bike fitter is doing is optimizing the positioning of a person on a bicycle to give them the maximum comfort or performance or aerodynamics or all of the above, to increase their pleasure and performance on a bike whilst reducing the risk of any injury or discomfort. I guess that would be a cover-all statement, right?
All right. Let's see what Rick does with that.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I would add to that because what I've seen.
You only get 1 or 2. sentences.
What I've seen is a lot of the fitters will do their best to fit the bicycle to the person with the existing equipment and components that come on the bicycle. And what we quite often find is that the cranks are too long, the saddles are too narrow, and the stems are too long. And you might need one or more of those things to actually change to facilitate what Lee has stated, to get the person more comfortable and be cycling in an injury-free environment.
Okay, so what I hear from both of you is that you're not trying to change the cyclist's physical attributes to fit a bicycle. It's the other way around in most cases.
Yeah, mostly. Although I
We
think
can talk
most
about what,
advanced,
huh?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think most advanced fitters are kind of taking a bit of a double approach, right? Because
Right.
more often than not, you're going to be seeing people that the bike is not far off, but the human is carrying big asymmetries, or they have an injury, or they're not flexible enough, or yada yada. And I think if they are qualified, so they're also physio, or they know a good physio, I think a lot of good fitters are either also trying to help with strength and conditioning work, or they're referring to someone who can. So there's an element of changing the
Right.
human as well, I would
I
say.
agree with that. It's interesting, I will only mention this and we can talk about that more later, is that in the United States, I believe there's a few more limitations on what a bike fitter can do. It's dependent on whether they have advanced degrees in physical therapy, or they might be
Yeah,
doctors of
yeah.
orthopedics.
And to be fair, it's the same in Europe.
Is
You know,
it?
when we
Okay.
do, yeah, when we do education here, one of the first things we're saying is, unless you're qualified to suggest an exercise, you cannot do that.
Okay. Well,
You know,
that's
you have
good
to
to
refer.
hear. Okay.
And one thing for the beginner fitters is that two things to remember is do not diagnose and do not treat.
Yeah,
Right. So when
yeah,
we get into some of the key skills and qualities, so we know what a bike fitter does in general. But there's characteristics of individuals who are very successful in bike fitting. And you might think these characteristics are what you would see in a successful businessman or any other successful professional. And in fact, that's probably true. But some of them, I'll list them, and then I want each of you to choose 2 to 3 of these that you think might be, in your experience, the most important in terms of the success of a person in bike fitting. I mean, it's a big order, but let's try.
yeah.
So, first of all, I think there's 8 of them. So we're going to talk about cycling knowledge. We're going to talk about anatomy and physiology. So that group of pieces of information. How good are your observation skills? Do you communicate well with other people? Can you solve problems? Are you empathetic and patient? Do you have some technical proficiency? And what type of business knowledge do you have? So those are 8 things that probably will contribute to your success. And I want each of you to describe 2 or 3 of these briefly, and perhaps why. But which of those 8, if you had to pick, would you really want to see in a person who wants to become a bike fitter? So I'm going to ask Rick this one first, and that lets Lee build on that one. So here we go.
Sure, I think it's important problem-solving skills. When we teach our bike fitting course, we teach both shop owners slash mechanics or bike store employees, and we also teach mainly physical therapists that come in and want to learn bike fitting. So some of that problem-solving skills is important. I think a lot of the PTs will have that because they deal with people and patients and clients all the time. The bike shops themselves are kind of compartmentalized. You have your salespeople, you have the mechanics. So the mechanics have when they diagnose a problem, hey, the bike doesn't shift, so they know right where to go. But I think bike fitting is more, like Leah mentioned earlier, is more of a conglomerate of different things. So when we teach our problem-solving skills and this type of area in bike fitting, we like to go back to the basics and you start here. We basically have built a process. You start here, and for example, you set up the cleats, it's done, then you can move to the saddle adjustment. When that's done, then you can determine if the crank length is correct. So every time you step forward, you don't have to change, usually don't have to change anything going backwards. So I think a good process really helps the fitters or the beginning fitters get started. The other main important thing is you can't believe how many people would tell me, wow, you're actually listening to me, because I would ask them every step of the way, how does this feel now compared to the others? Does it feel better? What if we move this here? Can you tolerate a little more saddle height on this once we get into the effective range? They said, you can't. I've had bike fits before, and the fitter went in there and took some numbers, went da da da, this was done, didn't ask me one question, and then we're done. And I couldn't ride the bicycle afterward because something happened and they didn't account for this or that. So I think those are the two critical ones that I see in this topic.
All right, Lee, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, uh, I couldn't agree more. I think, if you look at the list that you read out, Sue,
Yeah,
I think there's a few of them that are intimately linked, right? So
yes.
having empathy and good communication skills, I think go hand in hand.
Mhm.
When we do educational courses, I mean, I spend almost the whole first day talking about communication skills and how to listen and how to communicate, and not just through verbal communication and things like that, and I think ultimately, linked to one of the other points being a kind of essentially a good businessman. If you can't listen and communicate and create that relationship, then that's never going to be a long-term client, right? That's going to be a one and done client you'll never see again if you can't create that trust and relationship. So I think with bike fitting, it's an interesting one because there's definitely the sports science side with the requirement for being able to understand critical thinking and sort of standard like practices and procedures and processes, like you say, Rick. But I think so you almost need to have that kind of essentially kind of clinical approach to a lot of parts of it, but there also needs to be real focus and concentration on some of the soft skills. And to my mind, they're almost the harder bits to learn, because learning a
Hmm.
process and understanding, how to measure things in an effective way is relatively straightforward. But I think the real soft skill of being a bike fitter is getting the information you need out of your client in a way that doesn't make them uncomfortable and doesn't detract from their experience. Because the bit we need to remember as well is most people we're fitting, apart from pros who are paid to be there, this is their hobby, right? Or their leisure pursuit. So they're there of their free will and they want it to be a nice experience.
Yeah.
And I think, I've been and done kind of peer reviews on fits sometimes, and really effective, nice fits, but felt a little bit like going to the doctor, as opposed to something that should be a pleasurable experience.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's actually something I've asked Rick about. So I get the sort of benefit of having him as a mentor. as I'm learning all of this, and I can watch and contribute and all those things. But when I think of some of the students that we have in the courses, and when they finish, I sit there and I think, the skill that's the hardest to learn is one that you can't easily teach. You can role model. And so I'm sort of like in my scientific career, I was very fond of hands-on, the mentor apprentice kind of arrangement, because I felt like the students benefited the most.
Yeah.
And I still think that when I look at this process. And so we get into this next section, part of the education aspect. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are sort of like run up the road, I want to be a bike fitter, and then they get to this one. So we'll start discussing the next one, which is about education and certification. And that seems to be one that confuses a lot of individuals who are interested in this. And there's two different levels. So in our categories here, we have formal education. So you were in industrial design and Ruth is an engineer. So it's interesting how much that might or might not impact your ability to be a good bike fitter. So we'll talk about how much you think that contributes to someone's ability to do this. And then there's the certifications, or the courses that actually teach you how to be a bike fitter. And so that's something I think you'll want to talk about in terms of the IBFI, what their role is. But what I want to do then here is have each of you, so the formal education can be college degrees. That's usually what we're talking about. And it's usually related to exercise science, kinesiology, physical therapy, biomechanics, mechanical engineering, in your case, industrial design actually fits, and engineering fits. So I want each of your sort of opinions about how those types of trainings fit in with the clearly bike fitting focused certifications, which we'll talk about as well. So how about let's have Lee go first this time.
Okay.
Because you went second last time. All right, let's go. So something about formal education and then a little bit about certifications in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one. I've seen incredibly competent fitters who've got no academic background, but they are interested in learning. And I think fundamentally that's the real key, because I think the key thing with any bike fitter is that they need to be constantly learning. This bit of sports science that we call bike fitting is evolving at an incredibly fast rate. And I think we need to be really staying on top of all the latest research. And it's one of the things we've been trying to do with the IBFI, which I'll come to in a little while. But I mean, I think that being said, having some sort of appropriate and related education does definitely helps you to start with. Because I think if you're used to thinking in a certain way, and I think this is why, quite often people who have been into biomechanics, engineering, physiotherapy, they're taught to think in a very scientific, methodical way, and that's really absolutely the most important thing with any bike fitting process. Is it needs to be change, test, validate, that whole standard critical thinking process, which all of those types of practices include, right?
Yep.
And I think so if you do have any sort of relevant education, that's great, gives you definitely a little bit of a head start. But I don't think that precludes people who are just passionate about it and want to learn. I've seen some great level 1 students come through the IBFI recently with no formal education, started in a bike shop, kind of got given the task to go away and learn a bit about this, and have found that they love it and they want to learn, and they've signed up for level 2, and it's great to see those guys progressing through sheer force of will and determination and hard work. I think where the IBFI comes into that, quite specifically, the IBFI doesn't offer any education of its own. Yeah, so we are not a commercial entity. It's a non-profit organization, and we are agnostic. So we're not biased in any specific direction. But what we've done with the website is, we've tried to create a resource for people that are trying to get into bike fitting, to give them as much information and access to the appropriate people as possible. We recently created a new education page where we put on all of the upcoming educational courses by educators that we know do a good job. And we are slowly working through lots of educational courses, like with you guys, to get to the point where I can essentially kind of issue a certified course status. And what that would mean is, we know through reviewing the course materials and the manner of giving the education, that it will teach you everything which is on the syllabus. So in terms of each level at the IBFI, and there's kind of level 1 to level 4 currently. All of the educational courses that we're looking at, we can hopefully soon start to give these certifications that will say, okay, this course, it gives you everything and potentially more than is on the level 1 syllabus, which means we're confident you have learned everything required for you to be a level 1 fitter. And that then, along with a little bit of proven experience, pretty much fast tracks you into certification and accreditation. And that's been, a little bit of a painful process. I think it had kind of stalled in previous years, but we're kind of ploughing on really quickly now to try and get that all sorted. And we're working with you guys and several other good educators globally to make that happen. Sorry, I've rambled on. Does that answer the question?
So that's okay. So I'm going to ask Rick. About the formal education, and then something about certifications, perhaps different types that are out there. You can address that.
Yeah, so as an engineer, you're always asking why. Why does this work, or how does this work? And getting into people I started seeing a lot of clients coming in with knee pain. And the thing that got me first was, the fitters are mixing up, or the industry is mixing up mechanics with biomechanics. Just because a machine can efficiently turn a 180 millimeter crank, that doesn't mean that the human body can efficiently turn a 180 millimeter crank, because there's limitations that the body has that mechanically you can build around it. You can build a machine to take advantage of that. That's the first thing. Now, for the formal education, as a note to the beginner fitters, if you don't want to go back to college and spend time getting in depth with each of these courses, kinesiology, exercise science, biomechanics, or spend 9 years to get a physical therapy degree, I recommend starting with go look up and check out a personal trainer book. They're about that thick, and they get into all of these topics: anatomy, kinesiology, biomechanics. They show you exercises, stretches, etc. Go get a personal trainer certificate also. And that's kind of what Lee was talking about. That's a fast track to your formal education. And then if you want to dive deeper into a topic, then take the topic itself. Bike fit certifications is kind of a interesting aspect. My daughter being a physical therapist, everything is accreditation, and Sue as well. All of the courses at University of Florida had to be accredited by an accrediting agency. So our bike fitting course has been accredited by the CPTA and the APTA. So we want that step and say, is this bike fitting course safe for people? Are they going to get injured by what we're teaching? And it came back no. So our course, I think, is one of the only courses that's actually accredited by a real accreditation agency like the American Physical Therapy Association or the California chapter of the American Physical Therapy Association. That's what we try to, and because of that, we get a lot of physical therapists in the course taking the coursework. Now, about the differences in what we teach basically going back to the basics because the physical therapists don't know really much about bicycles, or maybe they have a bicycle that they've ridden a few times. We go back to and we've had to go back and say, this is what a screwdriver is, and this is what an Allen wrench is. But the bike shop mechanics don't know what a greater trochanter is, or a lateral malleolus, or how to find the center of the knee, or et cetera. So we've developed a pre-course that probably takes a good 2 to 3 days to go through that brings everybody to the same level. So when we take the course, everybody's able to jump in and actually get something out of day one going forward. What I've seen some of the other, I think Trek, this is 2025 now. I've heard that Trek is out of the bike fitting education now. They had something called Precision Fit. Shimano has their own, Retool has their own, but I think most of these tools are becoming, well, they're very expensive for a beginner fitter to purchase. You're talking, by the time you get all the tools and bells and whistles and computer, you're talking 25 to 45,000 US dollars to actually get started with the state-of-the-art stuff. Plus, they're trying to make them more automated and more simplistic to use. So it's now they're starting to teach, again, in my opinion, what I see, the industry with the regular tools are going with the retools, the Shimano's, the Treks, the Gurus, etc. It's all about how to run the machine instead of going back to the basics about what is bike fitting all about? How do I get this bike into this position where this person can ride it efficiently and pain-free? So that's what I kind of see the difference, and what IBFI is also trying to go back through and teach as well, is that how do we go back to the basics? This is level one, and once you pass a level one coursework, you know how to do this good of work for the client. And level two, a little bit more education knowledge, level three and level four, etc. going forward. So it's basically, if a client comes in and you're a IBFI level three, they're going to know you're a pretty good fitter. You know what you're doing. You're a journeyman apprentice, or you're not advanced yet, but you're on that verge of knowing what you're doing. You're not going to hurt the person when they leave. You're not going to do harm, as they say in the industry. You're going to do a benefit for the person, for your client. Costs, curriculum, reputation, learning style. Everybody is in about that same range for bike fitting courses. The difference, what we've had to do, and I think we're the unique out there in that we teach via Zoom on our bike fitting courses. And why do we teach via Zoom? So over the last, I've been a fitter for like 18 plus years now. I've basically taken this coursework and optimized it to teach via the internet. And the reason is because I got a lot of physical, once we became recommended by the APTA and the CPTA, all the physical therapists would say to me, well, do you have an online version? I would say, why? I said, well, I can't afford, I got too many patients. I can't afford to take a day off for travel, 3 days off for a coursework, and then day back. I can't afford 5 days off because I got patients coming in daily. So if you can put a course together that I can take sitting in my office at noon till 6 or whatever it is, I can take the course and I want to become a bike fitter. And that's the only way I can become a bike fitter. In fact, 100% of the physical therapists and also the chiropractors told us the same thing. We have patients all day long. So our course is a little unique in that we teach all of the coursework and we team students up. Student A will do a fit on student B and B on A, et cetera, going through the course. That's kind of the difference what we offer versus where you come into a facility and you're taught with on a machine as an example.
Well, I'd have a comment about that. I used Zoom extensively in my education endeavors, and some people are a little surprised at how effective it is in terms of student interactions. Because if you have all of the students live, the course we run is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So on Saturday and Sunday, they're not in their offices, and they're probably not in their offices on Friday either. But they will be using and working with their bicycle on a trainer or whatever they've got there. It's interesting what some of the students will do. Have their friends come with their bicycles. But it's much more dynamic than most people would imagine, because there's a lot of feedback, and we help do the analyses using some of the computer programs that we can actually, so they have to have a video camera. So we're actually doing a live analysis fit. And the students can see all of this because you share screen and that kind of thing. So at first I thought, really, this is all, we're going to have sort of this fit lab. It's really a laboratory. And I'm surprised at how well it works. And I think it's because the student is actually actively engaged in fitting. And they're taking the information we teach them on day 1 and 2, and they're applying and going through this process. And the students, and we're able to give them feedback, directly while it's going on, so that they
and that's very important. Let me interrupt you a second. That's very important, is because when they run into a roadblock, instead of telling them how to fix it, we ask them, well, what are the options? What would you do? What do you think is happening? And then we will ask, instead of us telling, we'll ask the other students, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think is happening? And they can usually, as a team, solve it instead of us having to tell them how to solve it.
And it's sort of a minor point, but not really. Everyone is a first-hand observer, which is not what happens in real classrooms. When there's an optimal size of a class to enable this to be very personal, it's a little bit like what happens in, master's or PhD courses. They're best if they're not really crowded. And part of it is it doesn't allow the students to hide, which some of them really want to hide.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
So I really like it. And I wanted to put a plug in for that because I think that some of the students, this also translates to really doing bike fits. I mean, we're very good at doing virtual bike fits at this point. And we're trying to get clients from Southern California to believe this. So they worked with Rick personally, and then they're like, "Where are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm in Bend, Oregon." And they go, "Oh." But then we say, "Well, we could do this online, using this." And they're still just not, I see the same hesitancy, but once someone does it, in fact, it can become more of an education course for the students. And I'll only say one thing. We've had people do bike fits who are like accountants in their job life, and they don't know how to use Allen wrenches when we start, and they don't know how to find out where you're going to adjust things. And so we have to spend some time working with them because they will be doing the adjustments.
Yeah, that's in the pre-course that we
No, this
mentioned.
is real bike fitting.
Yeah.
It's also in the pre-course, but the point is the students who don't have that familiarity quickly become familiar, and it's awesome how they change. You know, they're all of a sudden they're done and they go, oh, well, now I can adjust this and at least I know where, where to do this. So the benefit of having some of these virtual fits is that the cyclist becomes a team member for the fit.
Yeah, and I think kind of a couple of little points on the things that you've said. I think from my position of talking to people that are interested in getting into fitting globally, I think the importance of online courses is that there are a lot of people approaching us and saying, "Where can I do education? I can't see an educator in my country."
Yeah.
And having the ability to sort of say, well, take a look at the online courses that are available is invaluable. I think literally last week alone, I had about 4 people from Southeast Asia
Yes.
contacting us saying, and that's an area globally which is having an explosion in interest in cycling. But there aren't really many good educators there yet. And the ones that are, it's difficult to travel to and, all that sort of stuff. So I think online courses are going to be invaluable to help grow the bike fitting community. And I think the other thing is, I've recently, one of the, let me take a step back. One of my key goals, right, when I took over as the president of the IBFI was, I think there'd always been quite a focus on progressing bike fitting and making it better and more knowledge and which is great at the higher end, the level 3s and 4s,
Right.
etc., getting better and better. But I think where we failed previously is there wasn't enough emphasis on getting more level 1 bike fitters into like every bike store. So my dream would be that every good bike store in the world has a level 1 qualified person in there, so at least people are getting on the right size bikes in the first place.
Oh, bike sizing.
And
Yep, bike sizing.
yeah, and so to that end, I've been talking to some of the big brands about their bike fitting kind of systems and plans and we're beginning to get some really nice traction with some of the big global brands on actually committing to put a bit more effort into it and get their people to go out on courses and things like that. So, I think things are definitely looking up. I think there's like you say, Rick, there was definitely a reliance on technology in years gone by, and I think that actually put a lot of the public off of bike fitting because, I mean, how many times have you had someone come into your studio and go, well, I'm not really sure, I've had a bike fit. And it's like, yeah, but bike fitting is not an event, it's a process. It's something you should be doing regularly, like going to see your physio or, having your hair cut almost. Our body changes on a daily basis. So you should be updating your fit regularly.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of the old technology-based systems were very much a big ticket price bike fit, which then scared people off ever coming back. And I think the new model that which we're seeing, here in the UK, I think we've probably got the highest proportion of kind of independent bike fit studios.
Yeah, I think so.
So people doing bike fitting that are not attached to bike shops. And the model definitely seems to be changing away from just massive big ticket prices for fits that it's then, kind of one and done sort of thing. And I think fitting as a process rather than an event is definitely becoming more prevalent, which is really encouraging.
Yeah. No,
So, all right.
no, exactly. I agree. That's where IBFI is gonna come in and shine, because people that get bike fits shop by price. Here's a bike shop. Here's a professional fit for $29.95. And here's another guy, oh, I'm charging 300. Oh, I'm gonna go with the $29.95 because it's a lot cheaper. Well, you get what that's what I think you're going to. But
All right, so let me move on just a bit. So we've talked about the education and the courses, and then the next step is actually one that I hope the IBFI can help with. But this is where, so they have the education, but now, and we do provide this service through continued interactions with people who finish our course, and some of them really take advantage of this. Too much maybe, but gaining practical experience. So, okay, so you're going to go and set up and start doing bike fits, but I think there's a middle step, and you guys sort of allude to it, but it's actually doing fits, but under what circumstances are you doing them? So there are, let's see, the two things that strike me in the list that make sense are shadowing and mentoring, but those opportunities are not easy to come by. And then there's working in a bike shop, but that might not work. So what I'm sort of getting at is, what sorts of ideas do you have to offer students who finished courses? And I know, sort of the practical, an extension of what we do, the lab part of our course, where the student isn't necessarily out there by themselves, which can be a pretty big deterrent depending on your first experiences. How does a student handle this part of their training?
Mm. Mm.
I mean,
Yeah,
like
I
in
mean,
medical fields, you go and do an internship, or you go and do a
absolutely.
residency, or that, and there's a reason for this. So for
Yeah.
bike fitters, what is there?
Yeah, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because you may have had the best education in the world, but without the confidence to apply it properly, it's for naught, right? So, I absolutely think shadowing, mentoring is vital for fitters. With all the education that I personally do through my own company, we always throw out the caveat that if you've done a course with us, you're welcome to then come and spend a week shadowing us and that sort of thing. And I think what we've tried to do within the IBFI is try and add some tools into the system to help. We're literally just about to launch the mentoring scheme, which we've kind of had on the boil for a little while, trying to get sorted, but there were some legal ramifications we needed to just iron out, which are now all sorted. So that should go live on the website in the next kind of couple of months. And one of the things that I've always been very staunchly advocating is, if you're a level 4, the highest level of fitter at the IBFI, you only get to retain that if you're giving back to the industry. I need to be seeing from level 4 fitters them doing something to make the industry better. Yeah, and that needs to be either doing research or advocacy work or mentoring and giving skills back into the industry. So I think that's going to be key. And one of the other things that I think is also really important is just the ability to reach out to other fitters and ask for advice. When kind of we look at any level one education course, I think one of the most important things that you can be teaching is not to overstep your boundaries. If you're unsure, don't reach. Be honest. Say this is outside of my skill set or knowledge right now, but I can refer you, or I can do some research and get you back. I think the worst mistakes often happen when people are just trying to please the client without maybe really knowing what they're doing. And that's where you risk making mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we did with the new IBFI website was introduce a forum on there, so that if you've got questions, or you want to kind of talk about a difficult fit you had recently and get some advice and feedback, there's the opportunity. There's a forum there for you to be able to ask those questions. We've even split it regionally. So if you only want to speak to other US fitters, for instance, because each market is different. You all have different requirements. The way American fitters fit is quite different to the way kind of German fitters fit, for instance, just due to cultural difference and kind of commercial difference. You guys have been doing it longer than anyone else. So you guys do it slightly differently to the way we do.
One of the things you mentioned is that there's a forum. I'll be interested to see how effective that is. It will, at least in my experience, depend to some extent on visibility.
Yeah.
And
moderation.
Right.
And luckily, most bike fitters are nice guys, right? So nice girls. So
there's a lot of people out there with a lot of opinions. And some of them are pretty, stubborn, I would say, almost, but that's okay. So I mean, that's a problem I would like to see solved. As someone who's sort of learning, I have the nice, wonderful opportunity to be able to do this seamlessly. But I often think about people we had a student who was in like Alaska, and she was going to be fitting people on fat tire bikes for the Iditarod. And
oh wow.
Yeah, wow. And I was like, wow, her first, experiences with this. So it's something that I think, in order to support bike fitting as a career, respected sort of job, it's really, really important to have mentors who are experienced, who are willing to work with. And I don't think you have to necessarily be in the same place.
No.
That gets back to the Zoom thing. So
absolutely.
If Rick's doing a bike fit, it would be possible, with the permission of the client, of course, to have someone live who's participating and watching, but just simply isn't in the room. And I think it could be very effective, because as we saw already, the discussions that the fitter has with the client, and how do you listen, and what are the big points, all of that, it would be like practicing sort of the fits we do in the class. But at this level, it's something that's, in real time, and this is really what's happening. So I think that would be really good.
So
and there's sorry, Rick, you go ahead.
So the workshops and seminars, there's a new thing out there called CABDA. So if you look up CABDA, CABDA, there's 3 or 4 shows in the United States. It's kind of a mini Interbike, if everybody remembers what the Interbike the show was. And what's important about that is that bike fitting is becoming more prevalent, seminars within CABDA itself. So there's a whole series of bike fitting educational free. Once you get to CABDA, you can attend these seminars for free. I think shadowing and mentoring is going to be a little more difficult, at least in the United States, because bike shops are busy, fitters are busy, and if you can find somebody. But getting into practice fittings, I think you have to know enough about bike fitting first before getting into practice fittings, fitting other people. You don't want to do any harm on anybody, fitting them in the wrong position, not knowing what you're doing, and putting them in a dangerous position where they could injure themselves. Volunteered cycling events, the same type of thing. You can get set up. Uh, go join a big group in Southern California. There's the Orange County Wheelmen. They had 500 people um, in their organization. Things like that you can get into, and then volunteer at those. But again, once you know enough to fit the people. And I wanted to get this. So a fitter is going to come out of maybe a beginning fitter out of taking their first course. The one thing I recommend do not do is do not lease a space and set up shop right away, because you don't have the clientele. You're going to be paying $1,200 to $1,500 rent space, and you better have the number of clients in there. So practice in the garage, or I want to get Lee's opinion on this. What about working in a shop fitter versus a private fitter? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially at kind of the level one kind of stage of your career, working in a shop can be really useful because you're going to be doing a lot of bike sizing. Yeah. So, which
Yep.
is, to my mind, almost bike fitting, but slightly more basic. You know, you're not typically going to be worrying too much about injury or things like that. It's very much around, let's get you on the right frame size, the right stem length, you know, that sort of stuff. So you need to understand position, and you need to understand all of the fundamentals, but you're not really doing that kind of more advanced stuff that we as fitters um, with more experience are used to doing. You know, it's why within the IBFI kind of nomenclature, a level one certified person is called an accredited technician rather than a bike fitter.
Right.
Because you know, I think doing bike sizings and getting people on the right size bike in a store is a great way to start to learn those skills and develop your experience. You know, because like you say, not everyone can do a year of shadowing someone free of charge. You know, because they've got bills to pay, right? Especially in the current kind of economic climate. So, um, you know, I totally agree. And I think also, you know, if you're really interested and you want to learn stuff like this, which we're doing right now, is useful. You know, yes, there is some stuff on YouTube which you should take with a pinch of salt, but you know, most YouTube videos done by good bike fitters is normally going to be of use to you in your education. So, you know, deep dive into some of this sort of stuff and learn some, um, you know, skills from the experience of people like us, you know, sharing our interests and knowledge.
So Lee, might be a good point right now. I'll put it in the description, but right now, how do people find out about the IBFI on the website? Where do they go?
So the website is ibfi-certification.com. To be honest, if you pop into your preferred search engine, IBFI, it should be the first thing that comes up. And if you go onto there, literally on the homepage, there's a description of who we are, what we do. And if you're interested in becoming a fitter, you can just go, there's a page called certification. And that describes the process of how to start learning to become a bike fitter and how the IBFI can help you with that. You know, which ultimately is what we're there for. You know, I see the IBFI as serving two purposes. We're there to give the paying public confidence that the fitters they're choosing are correctly educated. And we're also helping bike fitters improve their skills and join the industry and, you know, hopefully make the industry better. I mean, one of the key things, just to kind of continue this kind of mentoring experience thing that we're talking about, one of the big things that I've been working very hard on is we're currently speaking to the government here in the UK to get bike fitting recognised as an industry. So here in the UK, for instance, if you are a bicycle mechanic, you can then apply for an apprenticeship scheme where your employer gets a grant from the government to pay your wages. So you can get, much more easily the experience you need to become a good mechanic. And no industry that I can think of almost needs more help in that respect than bike fitting, which doesn't currently exist. And I've been kind of reliably informed by a few people who understand this world a little bit better, that if I can get one government to do that, most other governments will then pretty much follow suit without much pushing. So, obviously I'm biased because home soil is much easier to work on, so which is why we're hitting the UK government first. But that seems to be actually progressing. So I'm hopeful in the next kind of year to 18 months we can get that into the legal system, and the Department of Work and Trade and whatever it's called, I forget now. And that I think will be a really big step forwards, because as soon as we can start getting help in the way that other industries can, I think that will make a huge difference.
Well, good. So, yeah, ours is bikefitnesscoaching.com if you want to get a hold of us. So I'll take over the next one here real quick. Acquiring necessary tools. So coming out as a bike fitter, you're going to need to have some tools to adjust the bike and to adjust the person and determine. So I'm going to ask Lee, what are your thoughts on what are the basic tools because again, coming out a beginner fitter, they're going to pay $1,500, $2,000 for a course, and then they come out and they're going to have to now buy some tools. The basic tools that they're going to need versus advanced tools that they can wait till later on to get. So what are your thoughts on those two?
It's an interesting one. I think ultimately the very basics you're going to need is some way to analyze the position. And even at level one, we would expect you would be analyzing that position dynamically, right? So rather than just having them static on a bike, measuring with a goniometer, that doesn't really cut the mustard these days, if that's a phrase that carries over into the US.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we expect at the very least some form of video capture. And these days there are some incredible bits of software or apps for tablet systems that can do that. So as an absolute beginner, I don't think you need to be spending tens of thousands of pounds or dollars on crazy systems. I think if you want to dip your toe into fitting and see if this is for you and get started and start to learn some experience, I think some very simple bits of software can be used to get you going. We especially if you're going to move up onto kind of like level 2, we really want to see you measuring from both sides, so we can capture little bits of asymmetry. Ideally we want to see how knees are tracking, that sort of stuff. I definitely wouldn't say you need to straight out of the gate go and start buying things like pressure mapping kit. It's a great tool, but it is expensive. Gives you good insight into what's going on, but I don't think that's a necessary first tool you would buy. Obviously, you're going to need some tools to work on the bike. you really only need basic stuff. You know, a torque wrench is going to be your biggest friend. And learning how to use that torque wrench is important because um, it's quite easy actually to use them incorrectly and get it wrong.
True.
Yeah, torque wrenches, good quality Allen keys or hex keys, increasingly Torx keys as well, are going to be important. And there are some other, I mean, one of the tools I use almost the most in our studio is a little self-leveling laser. You know, we use that for all sorts of things, including measuring the bike at the end of the fit. Um, and yes, you can buy those really cheaply. The ones we've got were hideously expensive, but I have had them 15 years. So, it's kind of price per use, right? On some of that stuff.
What about a trainer? What trainer do you think they should start with?
It's an interesting one. I mean, I think currently one of the really interesting trainers that you can get is the Wahoo kind of roller system. So it's like a rear roller for the back wheel and then a stand that holds the front wheel. That's quite interesting as a beginner
It's really
kit.
good.
Right there. That's the
Yeah.
the kicker roller. Yeah, that's
Roller, yeah. Because it's not terribly expensive. Most bikes can fit into it really easily, especially road bikes. It's a bit of a no-brainer. So that's an interesting bit of kit as a starting point.
Yeah, we kind of recommend, at least if you're going to start out the cheapest possible, you can go to Craigslist. Over here, we got this. It's an online garage store type of thing.
Yeah.
And you can buy a kinetic trainer, the green ones, for about $25. And if you
Oh wow.
really want to
Okay.
get started, just it's something to put the bike on. This one here, what way we have a kind of point here. We got a camera right there pointing backwards toward the person. There's a camera here pointing on the left side or the non-drive side. There's a camera right there pointing on the drive side, and there's a camera, or I'm in the way, but there's a camera pointing at the person. So I can go on the there's a laptop sitting right there. I can go and just flip the screens around. And you can't believe how important it is for the person you're fitting when you're discussing something. They have no idea what you're really talking about. Oh, you have a shoulder drop or you have a hip drop, and they don't know. That doesn't mean anything. But if you can have the right camera pointing at them and show them that they're leaning, they're lazy on the right side, or leaning like this when they're cycling, they know what you're talking about. They can straighten it out themselves, and you change the handlebars, you change this and that to get them as comfortable as possible. But once they actually see themselves on the bike, and I'll have Sue give an example of Scott real quick of what happened to this person came in. But it's important to have a camera system, and these are fairly inexpensive. These are the Logitech webcam, and they're about $100 a piece. Over the time, you can pick one up to start with, and then put on a tripod and move it around. You can do that to reduce some of the costs. But Sue, tell how important it was on the fits we've seen with Scott as an example.
It's actually really important. And Scott was a very, very experienced cyclist. In fact, he was riding all over the Western United States by himself on some crazy rides every day. And one of his complaints that brought him into our studio when he was in Bend, he just said, "Oh, I'm going to go see what they can do." He had been suffering with about an hour and a half into his rides, his lower left back started to hurt just above the hip bones. And he'd have to stop and stretch and do. And this was something he hadn't figured out yet. He was very good about thinking about himself as a rider. But he came in, he was talking about that as his main thing. Okay, so then we had him get on his bike that was mounted on the Wahoo roller, and we had him pedal, and Rick and I watch him from all different angles just to sort of get a general overview. And based on listening to him very carefully, during his start when we were interviewing him, we thought, oh, okay, so we look at the back and he had this slight rock that he was doing when he was riding. In other words, he wasn't level and locked into his saddle. He was sort of doing this little rolly thing. And so I thought, oh, okay, hour and a half, maybe that would be sufficient time to get some fatigue in some muscles that he's overusing in order to compensate for this. So the long and short of it is, one of our go-to solutions for stuff like this to start point is to give them a slightly wider saddle. So he was on like a I don't know,
132, 135 or something like that.
It's pretty narrow, and we can kind of see it was narrow. He was not a big person. So we put on a 155. And I'm always looking for his immediate response. It's so awesome. I mean, it's like being a doctor that solves a very big problem. So he sits down, he gets on the bike, and he starts riding. And the first thing that happens is he goes, oh, like this realization was like, so I said, so how does that feel? He goes, oh, you're not going to get this saddle back. And it was like, oh, so it's that good. And, and so we asked him, to describe in more detail what that was. And he said, I feel like I'm really sitting. I said, yeah, how's that going for you? So then we say, okay, now we're going to take it off again and put your saddle back on. And the reason we do that is to show him from the back, because he doesn't see himself that way, what he's doing. And so, we take the back camera, he looks and he can see this little sliding thing he's doing. And he says to us, do I really do that?
Do I really do that?
Oh yeah, you really do.
Is that me?
So it's pretty amazing to have them sort of self-assess what's happening. And he was able to clearly understand that even that little motion where he's not well anchored, because now he's felt what sitting feels like, appropriately on a saddle that's supporting the sit bones, and you're not doing that. They are able to, he quickly said, okay, this is it. And he bought 2 saddles from the bike stores down the street. Like, okay. And then what was so nice is bike fitters, we forget what the most awesome part of being a bike fitter is. It's when they contact you after they leave from a fit and they say, I didn't have any pain on a 100-mile ride, and it's like they're so excited. And when a person is passionate about cycling, the gift you give them is, something they're going to remember for a very long time. Because every day they ride, they're going to remember, oh, yeah. So it's been really good. But the cameras and the feedback and just my emphasis that, your interactions, your payback as a good fitter is to have the client leave your fit studio better than they were.
And I think it might be 100%. To volunteer at a bike store, because the bike store will have all the tools, except the cameras, but they will have, and Lee can attest to this. Every fitter comes under this or sees this. Person brings the bike in and it's got a flat tire. So you need a pump now to pump up the tire before you get it on the trainer. And then they say, oh, it's once they're on there, oh, it's not shifting right. Can you adjust the deraillage for me so I can get the bike fit? And it's on and on and on. And if you're in a bike shop, you can send them off to the mechanic and they can pay for those extra services. But I think the basic, if you're going to go alone, you need the basic, like Lee said, you need the basic tools to adjust the bicycle to the person. You need to know how to take off and put on a stem. You need to know how to take off and put on a saddle. The basics. Torque wrench is important. You can't believe how many cracked steer tubes, carbon steer tubes that I've discovered that I would hate to have seen the person. You describe it, hey, we're going to stop the bike fit here until you get a new fork. because the last thing I want to see you do is go down the hill about 55 miles an hour and the handlebars come off. That's
Yeah.
no good. So these type of things, I always inspect the bike while they're changing, look at the bike in general. How does it look? Anything loose on it? And there's a lot of the headsets are usually loose, and we tighten those up when we go through, explain to them on that. But like a software tool, like Lee was mentioning, we go through also a video analysis. You can get software tools for the iPhone, for the iPad, or for the PC, Windows PC, and they range anywhere from free to thousands of dollars a month rental. So make sure that you understand what you're getting. I think a good I know Lee mentioned the goniometer, but that's one of the main tools that the PTs go to. They say, here's a goniometer. I use it specifically. But once you introduce them to a low cost or free motion capture analysis tool, it's like, wow, look at this thing. I've never seen this before, type of thing. So that's a bare minimum of tools to get going.
Mm.
Um, so
Yeah, and I mean, I think, almost, I mean, I would say the thing to spend most of your money on is your education.
yeah.
That's the big spend. You need to get educated, you need to get certified, you need to be able to give your customers the confidence that you know what you're doing. Um, you know,
Yeah,
so,
and I think the strengths of volunteering at a bike shop are that if you're talk to the owner, but basically if you're doing work for them, you come under their umbrella insurance as well. So there's a big
okay.
expense you don't have to pay because you're coming under their insurance policy. Marketing, you come under the bike shop's marketing. It's almost self-marketing. If somebody wants to buy a bike, they're going to go into a bike shop and buy a bike, and be concerned about the pricing. The bike shop owner, you will probably work with them. They'll want $1,000 on every bike shop to help the shop go, but you're going to say, well, realistically, it's going to be more like this, and either volunteer or you can get a small stipend if you're working at a bike shop. That might be a good
Mm.
place to start and kind of, as they say over here, cut your teeth on getting
Mhm.
going. Lee, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the commercial reality of being a bike fitter, I think, is something that's often not talked about. I mean, I don't want to bang on about the new website, but one of the key things that we added into the members area was some commercial tools, some advice on how to run a business. I've seen great fitters who, are good at the analysis, critical thinking, the bike fit side of things, but fail because they're incapable of running a business, because those two skills are not the same, right? Don't know how to price themselves properly or market themselves. So I think any help you can get with that by, like you say, coming under the umbrella of another business or working together with another business, I think helps. I mean, from the personal kind of side of when we started, I would not been able to have stayed in business if I didn't have my other director, who also happens to be my wife, as a key part of the team, because she keeps me in track. She, makes sure that things get paid on time. She's a good sounding board. She helps with all the marketing side. So I think, if you don't have the skills, find someone that does and get them to help you, or ask advice. So I think that's important. And I think it is worth. I mean, you mentioned about insurances, and that's different in every country. But I think as a bare minimum, every bike fitter needs to be sure that they are covered by some sort of professional indemnity insurance, so that if they ever do get into any litigation, they at least have some insurance to cover that. And I think that's crucial. And that's actually, again, that is something that we're currently looking at with the IBFI to see if we could. We're talking to a few insurers around if you're a certified fitter, is there a way that we could get you cheaper coverage?
Mhm.
Which is, I know, what things like some of the mechanics societies and some of the physiotherapy societies around the world do. And, kind of with another hat on, in a previous life, I was a member of industrial, uh, uh, the IED, the Institute of Engineering Designers, and the Chartered Society of Designers. And some of the benefits that we had by being members of those was cheaper professional insurance and that sort of thing. So, and legal assistance and things. So I think that is important, and it's often, it's not cool, is it? So people don't talk about it.
Yeah, and that's another thing is that there is no insurance category for bike fitters. You're going to have to you're going to have to work with your insurance salesperson to see if you come under a coaching plan or a training plan or something like that to see if it's close enough. Explain to them what you do. They might put you under a mechanics plan, depending on that insurance company. But you want to make sure you're under the right plan. Like if you go in and get a general plan, you don't know what it is. It could be automotive insurance, or it could be insurance that you're a PT. And if something
Yeah,
happens with a bike fitter, they're not going to cover you because you're not doing physical therapy, you're doing bike fitting. So make sure you're
yeah,
under the right umbrella or the right category when you do get
yeah.
insurance.
Yeah, and hopefully, if I do my job properly, by the end of this year, that will have changed.
Oh, good, good. That'll be a big help to all bike fitters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's as I see it, that's part and parcel of what the IBFI is here to do, right? Is to make it better for fitters and the industry as a whole, and make it easier for people to do a good job.
Yep. Yes, exactly. Uh, Sue.
I don't think I have too much more to add. Um, I can add just a slight bit about the insurance. So in our course, one of the things we have teach the students is that your shop business, when you start actually fitting, you should have sort of a contract that the client will go through it with you and sign, basically that
Indemnification.
it makes sure you as the fitter need to make sure their bike's in good working order before you sort of finish the fit. But it sort of can alleviate any sort of misguided lawsuits or something else that might result. It really has nothing to do with what you did in the fit, but something that could have been missed or something that happened previously. So it's hard to think about. Most clients are not reluctant to sign these sorts of documents, but if you had an example document at IBFI, which is, this is something that we ask the client to look over and sign, so that basically it removes frivolous or non-causal lawsuits. I mean, in the United States, lawsuits are much up.
Especially,
I don't
Yeah,
know.
although it's getting that way in lots of other countries now as well.
Yeah, it's really
Uh,
hard. It discourages. It definitely puts a damper on trust a little bit. So when you do this, it's an act between you and the client, and it shows that you respect them, and that this is a working relationship, and that there's sort of ground rules, and that you have no intention of doing anything nefarious. But it's kind of a protection for both.
yeah, we have one, and
yeah.
because we came from California, which is a Sue happy state, I was lucky enough to have the next door neighbor owned a law firm. So I wrote up the first,
Okay.
which came about to 4 pages, gave it to him. He said, sure, I'll look over it, and looked over it, made some recommendations. I changed that. And then when we went to the APTA and the CPTA, they said, oh, because you could potentially have a PT in your bike fitting as well, they're going to be working on people. You need to add 2 more pages. So now we got 6 pages of which each paragraph is an initial. And when we show it to the clients coming in, they say, "What is this for?" And I say, "Well, if after the bike fit, you go out, ride your bike and you crash, it's not my fault." So basically explain to them that way. But we have things in there, even a disclaimer that says, we might take your pictures that we're using to evaluate, with the camera, like we talked about with the software, we're going to evaluate your bike fit, but we could theoretically use it in advertising. So they, even to that level, so there's no question about what's happening. And we also recommend in ours is that if in doubt, if you don't feel something is right, we highly recommend you take the bike after we get done fitting and the torque wrench and everything. You take it to your local mechanic and have them double check everything. What that does is that it gives them the peace of mind. And if the fitter misses anything, the bike mechanic will, certified bike mechanic will adjust it correctly. And also, if they're the last one to touch the bike and something happens, it's not your fault because they touched it last. So again, you got to kind of think like a California.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, it's one of the reasons I think, very good, thorough record taking is really
yes.
important. So
Yeah.
you can prove exactly what you've done in that session.
Right.
And and like we said earlier, this sort of stuff changes country to country, and even state to state sort of thing. So I think if you're in any doubt, either get in touch with us and we can help you find out, or contact your local kind of trade association, trade and industry bureau, that sort of thing. To find out what is required in the area you're working in. But it's one of those areas not to skimp for sure. Because one small mistake could basically end your career.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically, Lee, in summary, becoming a successful bike fitter requires a combination of education, what we discussed, practical experience, and a genuine passion for helping cyclists. I think that's very important too. You get as much enjoyment out of the bike after a bike fit that the customer. The thing you want to see is a big smile on their face when they're leaving the after the bikes fit. Invest in your education, practice your skills, and build a strong reputation for providing quality service. And also always include the customer as you are doing the bike fit. Any words, Lee?
No, I mean, I think that sums it up perfectly. Especially the last bit, don't hide behind a computer screen and let the computer dictate what you're doing. It's a bike fit should be a conversation between you and the client. I did a great workshop years ago in Germany with Curtis Cramblett, who I know you guys know. And he did a whole workshop on including the client in the process and sensory feedback and that sort of thing, and that always stuck with me. Even all those years ago, and I think that's a vital part of the fit.
Yeah, and one other thing that's important, we have a similar type of thing, but we looked at it a little bit differently. Is that we have a section in our course as to what the customer likes and what the customer doesn't like, especially for a bike shop. One of the main things I'll throw out there: bike shops want to put spotlights and key in on the newest, latest technology or something. So I was at a bike shop one time and was consulting to them. They had the bike fit machine in the middle of the floor. They had spotlights on it, and nobody wanted to use it because the customers don't want to be on display for other people walking in the door. They wanted a little bit of privacy. So we have a section on that as to what the customer expects to see, what they like to see, and what they don't like to experience. So that's very important. That what you talked about, Curtis, kind of hitting on those key aspects.
Yeah, and I think it's why these kind of a little bit like my own fit studio, which is brand agnostic, independent, not a bike store. We don't hold any stock of pre-built bikes. And, I think more and more of those are becoming the popular method. And I think it's because, like with any leisure industry, there's such a prevalence of just marketing nonsense, constantly bombarding people. We really, as fitters, are almost acting as essentially like the trusted advisors to help them kind of cut through all the kind of slogans and marketing spiel to figure out actually what should I be doing and what bike will actually fit me, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, the amount of time I spend at a fit, almost at the end, just chatting, advising on actually what tires would work best for you, or it's like, oh, how do I choose bar tape? And it's just like, well, consider this, and this. It's not difficult, kind of thing, But I think that's really where that whole relationship and trust piece comes in. Is I know personally that is very much how we run our business. Is we try and be as honest and upfront about and transparent about everything. To the point where if I, in our personal studio, we never discount anything. We sell everything at retail price, but what they get for that is our extra service and warranty and all that good stuff. However, if I think that they can buy it cheaper elsewhere, I'll tell them. And if they want to go and buy it there, fine, I don't mind.
Yeah. They will look at you. What you're also saying is that they will look at you as the expert. They're going to ask you questions. And in fact, all those bunch of stems over there, nothing over 80 millimeters. And that's what there's a lot of people that are coming back to bike fitting or back to cycling. We get, they last time they rode a bike was when they were 20 years old. Now they're retired at 65 or 70. They want to get back into cycling. And, they can't use that 120 minus 17 degree stem anymore. It's more of the 70,
especially not with modern geometries.
The other, the other way. So, that's the other good thing to be in a bike shop, is that you get access to this, that you don't have to buy this equipment, and going forward. So
and I think we've just discussed a whole lot of stuff for people to think about, and it might seem quite daunting, but I can't think of many other things I've done in my career where I've made grown men cry out of happiness from being able to do what they want to do pain-free. And when you get cases like that, it's it's pretty hard to quantify how good that makes you feel and how validating that is for the 7-day weeks and 12-hour days. And
so basically in my final thought was, be that fitter that wants to really honestly help your client, not the fitter that wants to upsell a new saddle, new shoes, new this, new that, as you're doing the fit.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
Okay, well, I'm going to thank both of you for joining me today to discuss this topic. And hopefully we get another chance to visit with you, Lee, in the not too distant future.
A lot of fun.
Some other topic, but it's been a lot of fun. And I think it's important that people get to meet you. And
thank you. Thank you. It's always fun to talk about this. It is my passion. So we're putting a lot of hard work into it to try and make things better, and hopefully we're beginning to make some good progress.
Well, it gives that first time fitter some place to start. I think that was the purpose.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. Take care.